One of the most kind of unfortunate things you hear are people saying, I would try the carnivore diet, except it's just so expensive. And they think that because, well, we've all noticed beef is going up in price, plus the problems with inflation and the economy on all the rest of it. People say beef is too expensive. I can't afford to eat all these ribeyes all the time. Well, the carnivore diet is not actually nearly as expensive as people make it out to be. I don't think it helps that most of the really big name influencers tell you to go out and eat ribeyes. They put up videos of themselves eating ribeyes. They show you their, staging area of their refrigerator where they're, having all these, their dry aging ribeye steaks in their refrigerator. That stuff doesn't help in some ways because the ribeye is not the most expensive cut of steak. Actually, that's probably the beef tenderloin is probably the most expensive most of the time. But as fatty cuts of beef go, the ribeye is notoriously expensive. And so people say, well, I'm supposed to eat ribeyes every meal, and I can't afford that. No, most people can't afford to eat ribeyes every meal. And I've done a number of grocery haul videos where I show you how you can save money on meat. But I want to really address this today. If you're moving in from the standard American diet and you're thinking of just jumping in with both feet, not even weaning yourself off carbs, but just throwing caution into the wind and thinking of going full carnivore, but you think it's just too expensive, well, this is a video for you. Or if you've got a friend in that position, send them this video. It should help. And I'm going to begin by telling you two things. First, we're going to go over the misconception that you need to eat ribeyes at every meal. And the second, I'm going to go over how if you're going from the standard American diet or something adjacent to it, then you're about to save a lot of money, or at least clear up a lot of space to buy more meat by doing the carnivore diet. So let's first go over the misconception. You don't have to eat ribeyes all the time. At least in my area, Walmart's price for a ribeye steak, depending what quality you get, let's see if you get a choice, it's $12.97 a pound. That's not great. The discount grocery, quote unquote, 2 minutes from my house usually has them for $15 a pound. That's not counting during the summer when the prices of meat come down dramatically because of grilling and grilling season in general. So, I picked up a couple of below select quality ribeyes this morning actually for $8.99 a pound. But that's not most of the time. Most of the time, you're going to be paying a premium price. People advocate for the ribeye steak because it has a superior fatty acid profile than most other steaks. This is absolutely true, but you don't have to go with steaks. You can go with a roast. Two cuts of roast come to mind as having a similar fatty acid profile, meaning sort of a fat grams to protein grams, that similar ratio. And that, for the first, is an untrimmed tri-tip. Now, I say untrimmed. It's going to have all the fat and connective tissue on it still. That's the one you want to look for at your grocery store if they carry tri-tip at all. Costco right now is carrying tri-tips, but they stripped all the fat off of them. That's unfortunate because a tri-tip is a beautiful steak, or in this case, roast, that when cooked properly, you can cook the whole roast to a medium rare. You can slice off big chunks of it, and it's got a beautiful balance of fat to protein. The other one is the sirloin cap. In barbecue circles, it's usually known by its Brazilian name, the picanha. It's absolutely one of my favorite cuts of meat. I could live happily for the rest of my life eating only picanha and tri-tip. I would be a happy man. It's called the sirloin cap if you find it typically at your local grocery store, or so I've seen Walmart call it picanha before, usually in Texas. But you could find this at Costco sometimes as a sirloin cap, and it has pretty much an identical fat to protein ratio as an equivalent quality ribeye steak. And they usually are coming in a few dollars less per pound because these are roasts. So what you need to do is cut these into steaks if you want to do it that way, or do what I do, which is I throw it in the pellet grill until it gets a nice smoky flavor. Then I toss the whole roast onto a cast iron pan to reverse sear it, and then I'll cut it into steaks there, eat the amount that I'm going to, and refrigerate it. Saves a lot of money. But that's not even the best way to save money. If you are not like me and you actually like ground meat, there are carnivores plenty out there who eat almost nothing but ground beef. And you can find ground beef on sale if you just watch your ads for pretty cheap these days. I've seen it for $2.99 a pound. That's way better than any ribeye steak or picanha or anything else. You can do that, throw a couple of egg yolks or have a boiled egg with it, maybe a few rashers of bacon, and you'd be fine. Most people can do the carnivore diet for fairly cheap. You're eating a pound to a pound and a half of ground beef. Well, if you ever notice that Walmart sells 10-pound chubs of ground beef, and they come in various different qualities from 73% to, I believe, 85 for those big 10-pound chubs. Next time you're at the store, go take a look. You might be surprised by what you find. But that brings me to the second point here, and that is if you are eating a remotely strict version of the carnivore diet, I mean remotely meaning relaxed carnivore even, you're not buying most of what I'm about to tell you here. So there are various databases online that tell you, that will give you the information for how much the typical American household spends for groceries. They typically budget, this is before the modern period, our present period of inflation. They said that typically most research points out that U.S. households have a budget for their groceries of $6,600 a year. Let's break this down by category. If you're on the carnivore diet, you're probably not drinking a lot of non-alcoholic beverages, and if you are, you're probably limiting it to Topo Chico, LaCroix, those sorts of things, or maybe bottled water. The typical American household spends on non-alcoholic beverages $384 a year. That's your Pepsi, your Coca-Cola, that kind of thing. If you're on the carnivore diet, you're probably not eating fresh fruit. The typical American household spends $270 a year on that. Canned and prepared foods, unless you're preparing for, a bad, ice storm in the winter, or just having an emergency food kit at home, then you're probably not spending the $255 a year that the typical American household spends. You're probably not spending $236 a year eating fresh vegetables if you're doing the carnivore diet, because fresh vegetables are not part of the carnivore meal plan. We'll skip the beef category. The typical American is only spending $219 a year on beef. That's a travesty. If you're on the carnivore diet, you're going to be spending a lot more than that. Poultry, if you're eating poultry, it's probably sparingly, aside from your bacon. Like, I eat pork, but I don't eat that much of it. And I tend to eat American heritage breed pigs anyway, not grocery store pork, unless I get a really good deal on ribs. But the typical, poultry rather, is $170. That's your chicken, actually, $170. Pork is the same, $170. So there's the ribs and things I was mentioning a moment ago. We'll skip past those, though. If you're on the carnivore diet, you're not buying bakery products at $165 a year. You're not buying croissants. You're not buying donuts. At least you shouldn't be, unless you fall off the horse. And even if you fall off the horse, you're not spending $165. At least I would hope not in the course of a year. Milk and cream, that depends on how strict you're doing the carnivore diet. If you're drifting towards the lion diet, which most carnivores, it seems, may start out relaxed, having coffee and that kind of thing, but after a while they start going strict. It just seems to be the natural order of things. But, we'll leave the milk and cream at $152 a year, because a lot of carnivores do have coffee, or they have yogurt or cottage cheese or kefir or something. Sugars and sweets. If you're carnivore, you're not having any of these. That's $143 you're not spending on that. Condiments and seasonings, typical American is spending $138. Seasonings are one of those things that some people consume, some people don't. I don't, other than salt. But for the sake of the argument, let's just drop that by 75%. So instead of $138, you're consuming like $35 a year. Why? Because you're just buying salt. Maybe a few basic seasonings like pepper or garlic or something. You're buying the cheaper things, though, when it comes to that. Processed vegetables. I'm not even sure what processed vegetables are. These might be vegetable medleys, in the frozen food aisle. $130. You're not spending that. That frees up a lot of money for the carnivore diet, to buy your beef with, or to buy your lamb, whatever it is you're doing. But there's another category here. Food away from home. Of the $6,600, you're spending $2,667 a year from food away from home. This is your fast food mostly. I think people actually think that's actually an inaccurate number anyway, because Americans tend to eat out rather notoriously several times a week. You're going to Chili's, or you're going to Buffalo Wild Wings. You're probably, you do that once a week. You're spending more than $2,600 a year with that habit. You're probably not doing that anymore, maybe except for Buffalo Wild Wings, for a once in a while chicken wing treat, as long as you're not getting sauce on them, because you probably knew this already, but Buffalo Wild Wings fries their wings in beef tallow, which actually makes them a cut above everybody else in their field. But are you going to be eating pizza? Are you going to be going out to Olive Garden or wherever? No, you're probably not. Maybe a steakhouse, if you found one that you know for sure doesn't fry their steak in seed oils. So if you're not spending that money, you can put it all onto the carnivore diet, and more importantly, you may have noticed if you're in carnivore groups, social media groups on Facebook or other social media platforms, that people on the carnivore diet tend to eat twice a day, maybe once a day often. That this diet lends itself better to eating less frequently just because it's so satiating. Yes, there are some carnivore groups that will ban you for talking about intermittent fasting, even though when you look at how people talk about there, they admit they eat once or twice a day. 3 times a day, maybe if they're like a bodybuilder or someone who's underweight trying to bulk up, that's a different situation. Most people are eating twice a day. So that's going to be probably less food or less divisions of food, less variety. So you're eating a pound and a half of ground beef a day, one meal, and you manage to get that for $3.50 a pound, we'll say. Okay, that's $5 if you're at the 1.5 pounds. And then what? You're spending, $10 on a nice steak. Sounds like a lot. That's probably going to keep you right around the $6,600 a year. Carnivore diet is not as expensive as people make it out to be. All you have to do is really, zero in on the stricter side of carnivore, and that becomes, the more strict you are on the carnivore diet, the truer that becomes. Because what are you buying? You're buying beef, butter, bacon, eggs, maybe a little salmon or something once in a while, maybe some pork once in a while, some chicken once in a while, if you want some chicken wings or something. You're going out very rarely. My wife and I almost never go out to eat anymore. And when we do, I take her to a nicer place, which on balance is way cheaper than going out to eat frequently. When you're doing these things, you save money, which leaves you more room in the budget for the higher quality foods. Hope you found this helpful. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments. Please like and subscribe if you haven't. It really does help. And as always, go out and optimize your day today.